You see her across the room, and something in your chest tightens with recognition. She's beautiful in that broken way that makes men want to save things. But behind her smile lives a graveyard of disappointments so deep that every man who tries to love her becomes another burial. She doesn't know she's carrying corpses. She thinks she's carrying experience. Watch how she enters relationships, not with hope, but with preparation for war. She's already planning your betrayal before your first kiss, already cataloging your weaknesses before you've shown her your strengths, already building walls before you've given her a reason to need them. This isn't wisdom. This is a woman whose emotional infrastructure was demolished by men who never deserved access to her heart in the first place. She learned early that love was a transaction with terrible exchange rates, that her body was currency men spent carelessly, that her emotions were inconveniences men tolerated until they found better options. Somewhere in her teenage years, when her nervous system was still learning what safety felt like, she encountered men who taught her that vulnerability was weakness and trust was stupidity. Now, she moves through relationships like a prisoner of war who never got debriefed. The first one was probably too old for her. She was 15, maybe 16, drowning in daddy issues she couldn't name yet. He was 22 or older, predatory enough to recognize emotional starvation when he saw it. He told her she was mature for her age, while training her body to respond to manipulation as if it were love. He called her special while treating her like every other girl he'd groomed into believing that sexual attention was the closest thing to affection she deserved. She gave him everything because she thought everything was the price of being chosen: her virginity, her trust, her belief that she was worthy of gentle treatment. In return, he gave her anxiety attacks disguised as passion, emotional unavailability disguised as mystery, and abandonment disguised as his right to explore other options. When he left, he didn't just break her heart, he broke her blueprint for what love was supposed to feel like. The second one found her when she was still bleeding from the first. She was 17, maybe 18, desperate to prove that the last relationship was an anomaly, not a pattern. This one was different, she told herself. More mature, more serious, more everything the first one wasn't. But broken people don't attract healers. They attract other broken people who mistake mutual damage for compatibility. He was emotionally unavailable in different ways. Where the first one was cruel through indifference, this one was cruel through emotional manipulation. He turned her need for reassurance into evidence of her instability, her desire for commitment into proof of her desperation, her love into a weapon he used to control her behavior. She learned to apologize for having needs, to shrink herself to fit his comfort zone, to accept breadcrumbs of affection while pretending she wasn't starving. When that relationship ended, she told herself she was learning, getting stronger, building better boundaries. But what she was actually doing was accumulating evidence that men were fundamentally untrustworthy, that love was a battlefield where she would always lose, that her heart was a liability in a world designed to exploit feminine vulnerability. She wasn't getting educated, she was getting traumatized. And trauma disguised as wisdom is the most dangerous kind of damage because it feels like growth. By her early 20s, the pattern was set. She attracted men who confirmed her worst suspicions about masculine nature while repelling men who might have contradicted them. Emotionally healthy men felt boring to her, because her nervous system had been conditioned to interpret chaos as excitement, unpredictability as passion, emotional withholding as challenge. She needed the adrenaline rush of wondering whether she was loved because stable affection felt foreign to her biochemistry. The third one was a narcissist who love bombed her into believing she'd finally found someone who understood her. For 3 months, she was the center of his universe. He showered her with attention that felt like salvation after years of emotional drought. He mirrored her interests, validated her feelings, made her believe that all her previous relationships had failed because she'd never met anyone who truly appreciated her uniqueness. Then came the devaluation phase, slowly at first, so she couldn't pinpoint when the shift began. Comments about her appearance that felt like observations but landed like criticisms, comparisons to other women that seemed casual but struck her self esteem like precision missiles, withdrawal of the attention that had become as necessary to her as oxygen. She found herself working harder and harder to earn back the love that had initially been given freely, never recognizing that this was the entire design of his psychological warfare. When he discarded her for the new supply he'd been cultivating while she was fighting for his attention, something inside her shattered beyond repair. Not just her heart, but her capacity to believe that men were capable of genuine love rather than strategic performance. She decided that every man who claimed to care about her was either lying or delusional. That emotional availability was always temporary. That the love bombing phase of relationships was just elaborate manipulation designed to extract whatever men wanted before revealing their true indifference. She started approaching relationships like a general planning for inevitable defeat. Better to expect betrayal and be pleasantly surprised than to hope for loyalty and be devastated by reality. Better to keep emotional distance than to risk the annihilation that came with genuine intimacy. Better to control the terms of her own abandonment than to be abandoned on someone else's schedule. Now watch how she operates. She gives her body before she gives her heart because physical intimacy feels safer than emotional vulnerability. Sex can be performed. Love requires presence. She can fake orgasms, but she can't fake feeling safe enough to let you see her without her armor. She's learned that men will take physical access, whether or not she offers emotional access, so she might as well maintain control over the transaction. She tests every man she meets, not consciously, but compulsively. She'll create drama to see if you'll stay, push boundaries to see if you'll enforce them, act unstable to see if you'll abandon her like the others did, withdraw affection to see if you'll chase her the way she had to chase them. These aren't relationship skills. They're survival strategies developed by someone who learned that love was a war zone where only the paranoid survive. Notice how she talks about her past. Every story is a variation on the same theme. She trusted. She gave everything. She was betrayed. Men are always the villains in her narrative, never fellow victims of circumstances beyond anyone's control. She's never met a man who was simply incompatible with her. Only men who used her and discarded her. Only men who promised forever and delivered disappointment. Only men who saw her value and chose to waste it anyway. She doesn't realize that by focusing exclusively on what was done to her, she's erasing her own agency in choosing partners who were obviously unsuitable for serious relationships. She doesn't see the pattern in her selection process, the way she's drawn to men who embody the same emotional unavailability that wounded her originally, the way she mistakes red flags for green lights because her nervous system was trained to associate love with suffering. Good men confuse her. Their consistency feels fake because she's been conditioned to expect erratic behavior. Their emotional availability feels suffocating because she's used to fighting for attention. Their desire to build something stable feels boring because her biochemistry craves the chaos that feels like home. She interprets their kindness as weakness, their patience as lack of passion, their reliability as evidence that they must be hiding something terrible. When a decent man shows interest, she immediately begins the process of disqualification. He's too nice, which means he's probably manipulative. Too available, which means he probably has no other options. Too consistent, which means he's probably hiding his true nature until she's emotionally invested enough to be devastated by his inevitable betrayal. She'll find reasons to reject him before he can reject her, mistakes prevention for protection. But she's not protecting herself. She's imprisoning herself in a cycle that guarantees she'll never experience the love she claims to want. Every time she chooses an emotionally unavailable man over an emotionally present one, she's reinforcing the neural pathways that tell her she's unworthy of genuine care. Every time she sabotages a healthy relationship to avoid the risk of being hurt, she's ensuring that hurt is the only thing she'll ever know. The tragedy is that her brokenness is visible to predators and invisible to protectors. Men who want to exploit feminine vulnerability can smell her damage from
They
across a
recognize the
crowded room.
signs.
The way she apologizes for taking up space, the way she's grateful for the minimum effort, the way she interprets basic human decency as extraordinary kindness, because her standards have been demolished by men who treated her like garbage. Meanwhile, emotionally healthy men either don't recognize her wounds or recognize them and choose to avoid the complexity that comes with loving someone who's been systematically destroyed by previous relationships. They can sense that she's not just carrying baggage, but pulling freight trains of unresolved pain that will derail any attempt at building something stable together. She exists in a psychological purgatory where she's too damaged for healthy relationships, but too self aware for completely destructive ones. She knows enough about her patterns to articulate them, but not enough to change them. She can identify her triggers, but not neutralize them. She understands that she's attracted to the wrong men, but can't make herself feel attracted to the right ones. Late at night, when the distractions fade and she's alone with her thoughts, she knows something is fundamentally broken inside her. She knows that her relationship history isn't a series of unfortunate coincidences, but a pattern that originates from within her own damaged psychological architecture. She knows that she's not just unlucky in love, but actively participating in her own romantic destruction. But knowing doesn't equal healing. Understanding doesn't equal transformation. She's trapped in a prison of her own psychological construction, using the keys that could free her to build more locks instead. Every failed relationship becomes evidence that love is impossible rather than evidence that she's chosen to love people incapable of loving her back. She's become a collector of romantic casualties, accumulating evidence that men are inherently selfish, commitment is inherently temporary, and she is inherently unworthy of the kind of love that lasts. Each disappointment feels like vindication of her cynicism rather than an invitation to examine why she keeps attracting and being attracted to people who confirm her worst fears about human nature. The men who shattered her are long gone, living their lives without consciousness of the destruction they left behind. They've moved on to shatter other women while she remains frozen in the emotional landscape they created through their carelessness, their cruelty, their complete indifference to the human cost of treating hearts like toys to be played with until something more interesting comes along. She carries their damage like DNA, passing it on to every relationship she enters. She's become an agent of the same destruction that created her, pushing away good men with the same emotional unavailability that originally wounded her. She's not just a victim of toxic masculinity, she's become a carrier of it, spreading the virus of emotional unavailability to every man who tries to love her. This is what emotional shattering looks like. Not dramatic breakdown, but quiet systematization of despair. Not visible wounds, but invisible scar tissue that prevents new growth. Not conscious cruelty, but unconscious repetition of the patterns that destroyed her capacity to believe that love could be anything other than a sophisticated form of betrayal. You think you can save her. You think your love will be different. You think you can prove that not all men are the same. But she's not looking for salvation. She's looking for confirmation that her cynicism was justified all along. And if you're not careful, she'll turn you into the very thing you tried to protect her from. Another man who started with good intentions and ended by walking away. The woman who's been emotionally shattered by too many men doesn't need another man. She needs to understand why she keeps choosing men who shatter women. She needs to recognize that her attraction to unavailable men isn't romantic destiny, but psychological compulsion. She needs to see that her patterns aren't just happening to her, but happening through her choices, her responses, her unconscious repetition of familiar dynamics. But that recognition requires a level of self examination that most people avoid because it's easier to blame external circumstances than to acknowledge internal responsibility. It's easier to see yourself as a victim of other people's choices than as a participant in your own destruction. It's easier to wait for someone else to heal your wounds than to develop the skills necessary to stop creating them. Until she does that work, she'll remain exactly what she is, a walking museum of romantic disasters, a cautionary tale about what happens when wounds become identity and pain becomes personality, beautiful in that tragic way that inspires poetry and destroys the poets who try to love her. You weren't meant to fix her. You were meant to recognize her. And once you do, you have a choice. Become another casualty in her collection of failed relationships, or walk away before she turns your love into evidence of why love can't be trusted. Some women are broken by life, others are broken by men. But the ones who are emotionally shattered by too many men aren't just broken, they're contagious. And the only thing more dangerous than loving someone who can't be healed is becoming someone who no longer believes healing is possible. The damage wasn't done by the men who left, it was done by the men who stayed long enough to teach her that leaving was inevitable. Now she's teaching the same lesson to everyone who tries to love her. The cycle completes itself, and somewhere in the world, another woman is learning that men are not to be trusted because the woman who should have known better chose to trust the men who proved they shouldn't be trusted. Maybe you'll recognize her before it's too late. Maybe you'll see the signs before you become another chapter in her story of romantic failure, or maybe you'll become exactly what you're trying to save her from, another man who thought his love could overcome her damage, only to discover that some damage is designed to overcome love instead. The choice is yours. But remember, she's already made hers. Long before she met you, she decided that disappointment was safer than hope, that distance was safer than intimacy, that expecting the worst was safer than believing in the possibility of something better. And until she chooses differently, every man who loves her becomes another casualty of choices she made before they even met. You can see it in her eyes if you know what to look for. The way she watches you, like she's waiting for you to become someone else. The way she holds part of herself back, even in moments of complete physical surrender. The way she says, I love you, like she's apologizing for a mistake she's about to make. She's not loving you. She's grieving you in advance. That's how you recognize a woman who's been emotionally shattered by too many men. She loves you like she's already preparing for your funeral. Maybe that recognition will save you both, or maybe it will just make you another ghost in her collection of men who saw her clearly but couldn't love her differently. Either way, now you know what you're looking at. The question is what you're going to do with that knowledge before it becomes just another regret in a story that was written long before you arrived to read it.